Hello. So let us start from where we left in the previous lecture. Remember, we calculated the relativistic correction to the hydrogen energy levels, and we had calculated this correction to first order only. Now, this result that we have written here is basically a result which was calculated in the uncoupled basis that we had introduced in the last part of the previous lecture. So what I mean to say is the following, that this object E1 R for relativistic, N, L, M and MS, this object is really the matrix element of this perturbed Hamiltonian H1R in the uncoupled basis. That means N, L, M and MS, which we introduced in the previous lecture. In fact, it was introduced in PH 204. We just recapitulated it. So this is the matrix element in the uncoupled basis. That is why we had written the subscripts M and MS to remind us that this really is calculated in the uncoupled basis. But as you can see from this expression, that this is only dependent on N and L, principal quantum number and the orbital angular quantum number. So this is really a function of N and L only, and it is independent of M and MS. Now what happens if we choose this uncoupled basis for our calculation? The first thing that you observe is, of course, your H1R, it becomes diagonal. So that is the first observation that you can have. It becomes diagonal in the uncoupled basis. Now the question is, we could consider the same matrix elements in the coupled basis. So I can take this H1R, but I may want to evaluate the same object, this H1R, but now not in the N, L, M and MS basis, rather in the coupled basis, where the basis is represented by N, L, J and Mj. So this is H1R and N, L, J and Mj. Then do we need to recalculate it from the start in the coupled basis, or can we actually say something from our calculation which we already had done in the uncoupled basis, which we have written here? Now the answer is no, you really do not need to calculate it afresh, because this and this are really the same. Now you should of course ask, why should it be same at all? Now for that, let us again take help of our picture which we had drawn so many times in this discussion. So here is our picture, the degeneracy thing. It's L0, L1, L2 like this. So this is S, P, D, and then you have N is equal to 1, N is equal to 2, N is equal to 3, it goes on. So these are your energy states where there are degeneracies, of course. So this looks something like this. Now to understand why these two are the same, this is and this is, these two are same, let us actually fix one value of N and L. So suppose let us choose this particular level. So that means we have fixed the value of N and value of L. because it has this level has a fixed value of n which is 2, fixed value of L which is 1. Now of course there are lots of states in this particular level that I have just chosen for a fixed n and L. There are lots of such energy levels, energy states, but all of which have the same value of energy simply because we have different m and ms, but the answer here which we have written does not depend on m and ms. In the coupled basis, we are also looking at the same subspace with n and L fixed, and they have just kind of reorganized states with the values of j and mj, or to be more precise, with two values of j and several values of mj. Why two values of j? Because as we have seen in the previous lecture, that j can be either L plus half or L minus half when we are talking about spin half electron. So the coupled basis is another way to describe the states coming from tensoring that L multiplied with spin half. The fact that every state in coupled basis is some linear combination of states in the uncoupled basis with different values of m and ms, that add up to mj, but this answer f of nl which I have obtained in the uncoupled basis does not depend on m and ms. So whatever linear combination you need, it does not change because the answer does not depend on m and ms. So whatever n, l, m, ms you have evaluated, is exactly the same as you will get if you evaluate the perturbed Hamiltonian in the coupled basis also, n, l, j, mj. So that means whether or not I choose my n, l, m and ms as my good basis vectors, I will get the same result if I choose these n, l, j and mj as my basis vectors also. So this answer that I have written here is going to remain unchanged irrespective of what kind of basis we have chosen. Now with this in mind, let us actually go to the discussion of spin orbit coupling. This discussion that we had just now is going to help us when we will take the effect of relativistic motion as well as spin orbit coupling together. Then we will see that why this discussion about the non-changing of the result when you use uncoupled basis or when you use coupled basis is going to be important. So let us wait for that, and let us first discuss the spin orbit coupling. So as the name suggests, that in this part we are going to give importance to the spin of the electron, and in that sense you can think of the electron in orbit around the nucleus, and then from the electron's point of view or from the electron's rest frame, the proton is circling around it. That means suppose I am sitting on this electron, the electron is here, and what will I see if I am just sitting on top of this electron? I will see that I am sitting fixed and this object, the proton, is actually circling around me. So the electron will also see the same thing. It will see that this plus charged proton is basically circling around it. So then what will happen is that this orbiting positive charge therefore will set up a magnetic field. So that magnetic field will be in this direction. If the proton is rotating in this way, the magnetic field will be generated, and the direction of the magnetic field B I have shown here in the electron's frame, and this will exert a torque on the spinning electron, and it will tend to align the magnetic moment mu along the direction of the field. So that's what is going to happen, and you know already what the Hamiltonian will be. The Hamiltonian will be H, which is equal to minus mu, where mu is the magnetic moment of the electron, which is dotted with this B. So we need to figure out the magnetic field of the proton and as well as the dipole moment of the electron, because these two are the unknowns, in order to figure out what this Hamiltonian is, which will give us the interaction between the magnetic moment of the electron and the magnetic field which is created because of the motion of the proton. We need to have inputs about both this mu and B. Now the origin of this Hamiltonian H, that I have written as minus mu dot B, again if time permits I will discuss this when in our usual class hour, but for the time being let us go ahead with this expression. Now at first let us calculate the magnetic field of the proton. What will be the magnetic field due to the proton, that we need to calculate. So if we picture the proton from the electron's perspective, I will see it as a continuous current loop. Therefore, if you try to calculate the magnetic field, you have to use Biot-Savart law. So if you use Biot-Savart law, and if suppose your distance between the electron and the proton is given by r, then the magnetic field will be given by mu naught times I divided by 2r. Now here what is your effective current I? This I is being created because a positive charge is circling around. So I, it should be the proton charge divided by the time period of the orbit. Now on the other hand, we also know that the orbital angular momentum of the electron in the rest frame of the nucleus is L, which is equal to mv times r, which is nothing but m into r, but v is nothing but 2 pi r by t. 2 pi r is the circumference of this circle, and this is divided by t. Remember, it is completely classical calculation. We are just doing a classical calculation, and we will see finally what happens. So this is going to give us 2 pi m r square divided by the time period. That means if it starts from here, what is the time that it will take by completing a full circle and coming back at the same point. So that is being given by this capital T. But now you also see that B and L, this angular momentum that I have just talked about, the angular momentum of the electron in the rest frame of the nucleus, both of them actually point in the same direction, which is this up direction. We already have pointed out the magnetic field in that direction. Now I am saying that this angular momentum of the electron will also be in the same direction. So therefore, you can write down the magnetic field B as mu naught I by 2r, which is nothing but mu naught, and I you have just written E by capital T is 2r capital T, which is mu naught E by 2r. We can just replace this T by the expression of L. So this is nothing but mu naught E L divided by 2 pi m r squared. because 1 by T is capital L by 2 pi m r square. So therefore this is equal to EL divided by 4 pi epsilon naught m c square r cube. Now what did I do in this step? I used the expression T equal to 2 pi m r square by L. Also I have used this expression that the speed of light is given by 1 by square root epsilon naught mu naught. So by using these two I have obtained this result. Therefore finally I can write B as 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught E by m c squared r cube and then this L. So this is the expression of the magnetic field that we have obtained by a purely classical calculation. We have not done anything quantum in this whole calculation. Now after we have figured out what will be the expression of the magnetic field, let us now focus on the magnetic dipole moment of the electron or magnetic moment of the electron. Magnetic dipole moment of the electron. So the magnetic dipole moment of a spinning charge is related to the spin angular momentum, and you also know that the proportionality factor is the gyromagnetic ratio. Now consider a charge q which is smeared out around a ring of radius small r, and suppose that this ring is rotating about an axis with period capital T. That means what I am saying is the following: you have a ring like this and you have this charge q which is smeared around throughout this ring. Mass of the ring suppose is m, and this is your axis about which the ring is rotating. The radius is given by small r. Now the magnetic dipole moment of the ring is defined as the current times the area. So what is the current that is being flowing here? So Q is the charge, and Q by capital T, where capital T is the period, Q by T will give us the current, and current times the area. What should be the area here? Again the area will be pi times r square. Therefore my magnetic dipole moment should be given by mu equal to Q by T into pi into r square. And suppose this is rotating in this way, so the mu is in this direction. So mu equal to Q pi r square divided by capital T. Now if the mass of the ring is small m, which I already have said, its angular momentum is the moment of inertia times the angular velocity, right? So you simply write this as S equal to 2 pi by T into m r square. M r square, remember, is the moment of inertia, and angular velocity is of course given by 2 pi by T. So together this S is going to give you the angular momentum. So this is 2 pi m r square by T, and therefore 2 pi m r square by T, and therefore mu, the magnetic dipole moment, which we had written as Q into pi r square divided by T, but this capital T is now 2 pi m r square S. So S is also in this direction. So r square gets cancelled, pi gets cancelled. We have Q by 2m into S. and therefore the gyromagnetic ratio should be mu over S, which is nothing but q by 2m. And you note that this object is independent of r as well as independent of capital T. Now, whatever I have just mentioned here as the magnetic dipole moment of the electron, it is a purely classical calculation. What happens in quantum mechanics, it turns out that the electron's magnetic moment is just twice the classical value. That means the electron's magnetic moment mu e, let us use this symbol, is minus e over m times s. That is the value that you obtain if you do the calculation with an electron. This factor, this extra factor of 2, it was explained by Dirac in his relativistic theory of electron, and of course we are not going to give the explanation here because it's beyond our reach, but let us put all the things together at the moment and let us write down what is our H spin orbit. So H spin orbit, therefore there will be this E by m c square r cube. Remember, H spin orbit was minus mu dot b. This is what we started with, and then we individually evaluated what should be the b and what should be the mu, and now we are just going to dot two of them. So it will going to give us 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught. There is one e from this b and there is another e from this mu e. So there will be e square. So e square by 4 pi epsilon naught, and then 1 by m c square r cube, and then we have s dot l. S dot l. So this is the final result. E square by 4 pi epsilon naught 1 by m c square r cube s dot l. Oh no, sorry, there is another m here, so this should be m square c square r cube. Now let me talk about something which is not very pleasant. So the thing is that in calculating this whatever expression of HSO is, we have actually cheated you in the following sense. See, when we did this analysis in the rest frame of the electron, we did not simply keep in mind the fact that the system is not an inertial system. The electron is accelerating because it is not having rectilinear motion. So the electron accelerates, and as the electron orbits around the nucleus, we can safely say that it is not an inertial system. Now you can get away with this if you make an appropriate kinematic correction, and that kinematic correction was first done by Thomas. That is why it was known as Thomas precision. But we will not go into the details of this discussion. It will be again discussed in your atomic molecular physics course. Let me just briefly tell you the answer. The answer is very simple. If you incorporate the Thomas precision, it just throws in a factor of half. So your final H1, let me write now 1, because this is going to be the final spin orbit Hamiltonian. So H1SO, it is going to be E square by 8 pi epsilon naught instead of 4 pi epsilon naught into 1 by m square c square r cube s dot l. So this is your spin orbit Hamiltonian. Now apart from two corrections. One, of course, is the gyromagnetic ratio for the electron, and the other one is this Thomas precision factor, which, if you closely look, coincidentally exactly cancels one another. So it is just what you would expect on the basis of a naive classical calculation. Now, what is the physical meaning of this spin orbit coupling? It is basically due to the torque exerted on the magnetic dipole moment of the spinning electron by the magnetic field of the proton. And of course, this magnetic field is there because it is being seen by the electron's instantaneous rest frame. Okay. So, of course, there are few comments that I want to make here. Firstly, we have already said that it can be very dangerous to picture the electron as a spinning sphere. In fact, in your PH 204, it must have been emphasized very strongly that please do not try to see the electron spin as just electron spinning like a sphere around some particular axis. It's not a correct picture to visualize in that manner. Now, it is not too surprising that naive classical model gets the gyromagnetic ratio therefore wrong, because in this whole calculation I have used this as intrinsically as spin, but we did this classical calculation. And as I have already mentioned, that the derivation of this G factor basically will give you the correct result if you come directly using Dirac's theory of relativistic electron. So this G factor will just give you exactly 2 if you follow Dirac's prescription. But then there is something more to the story, that is, if you use the quantum theory of electrodynamics, which is known as the quantum electrodynamics, it will reveal some tiny more correction to this electron gyromagnetic ratio. In fact, if you do that calculation, GE, of course this is just a side remark, do not take it seriously at the moment because we are not going to discuss this in the course. This GE is going to be 2 plus alpha by pi plus dot dot dot. In fact, it is not exactly 2, rather it is 2.002 something. The calculation and the measurement, both of them, like the theoretical calculation and its measurement in the lab, is basically called the anomalous magnetic moment of the electron. And this experiment as well as the theoretical calculation is so precisely matching that till date this is actually thought of as the greatest achievement of 20th century physics. So this is something which you have to appreciate. Maybe it is very difficult to appreciate now, but if some of you actually go on to continue physics and if you learn quantum field theory, immediately you will understand the beauty of this calculation. Anyway, let us come back to our discussion. So we were actually looking at the spin orbit interaction, and as I said that we are going to explicitly calculate this. What is the matrix element and what should be the correct basis choice to calculate this matrix element? All these things we will discuss now. Now, in presence of spin orbit coupling, the first thing you note is that the Hamiltonian no longer commutes with L and S. So the spin and orbital angular momentum are not separately conserved. In fact, you can calculate this L dot S with L. You can calculate L dot S with S and explicitly check that they do not commute. So this again is a homework. Please calculate this. But this H1SO, this commutes with L square and S square, because if you calculate L dot S, L square, if you calculate L dot S, S square, in fact if you calculate L dot S, J, and if you calculate L dot S with J square, you will immediately see, because L dot S is nothing but your H1SO, that H1 sphere orbit, this Hamiltonian, commutes with all of them. For example, one step I can show, if you try to calculate say JZ with L dot S, how should you proceed? Because JZ is nothing but LZ plus SZ, we can write it like this, and then this is nothing but LZ plus SZ, LX SX plus LY SY plus LZ SZ. And then again you can see that this is LZ, the non-zero things that will remain, LZ, LX commutator, SX plus LZ, LY commutator with SY plus SZ, SX commutator with LX plus SZ, SY commutator with LY. All other commutators are 0, keeping in mind that L and S both commute with each other. So therefore this is going to give us IH bar LY SX minus IH bar LX SY plus IH bar SY LX minus IH bar SX LY. So they get cancelled simply because LY and SX, they do commute with each other. Therefore I can interchange their order and everything get cancelled. So this is 0. Similarly, you can calculate the other components also and finally figure out what is this object, what are these objects, and everywhere you will see that L square, S square, J square and JZ, they are commuting with the Hamiltonian, which is the spin orbit Hamiltonian. Therefore, these quantities are conserved, and to put it in a way which we have already mentioned during the discussion of the coupled and uncoupled basis, LZ and SZ are not good states to use here, but eigenstates of L square, S square, J square and JZ are. So we have to use the coupled basis in this calculation. This is the reason we had introduced the discussion of coupled basis and the uncoupled basis in the previous lecture. So let us see how we can do that. In fact, if I want to write J square is nothing but L plus S whole square. This is nothing but L plus S dotted with L plus S. And this is L square plus S square plus 2L dot S. Therefore we can write L dot S as half J square minus L square minus S square. So it is very easy to calculate therefore the eigenvalue of L dot S. I know that what this J square will give when it acts on these basis states. So this is going to give us H square by 2 J into J plus 1 minus L into L plus 1 minus S into S plus 1. But S is always fixed, S is half, therefore I can safely write this whole object as 3 by 4th. So in the coupled basis, this is the eigenvalue of the L dot S operator. Therefore, what remains is E1 spin orbit NLJMJ. So this is, according to our expression, it's E square by 8 pi epsilon naught 1 by m square c square, E square by 8 pi epsilon naught 1 by m e square c square, but then there is a 1 by r cube, and this 1 by r cube, and then there is also s dot l. Everything needs to be sandwiched between n, l, j and mj. S dot l divided by r cube n, l, j, mj. Now S dot L acting on N, L, J, Mj, I just had written this result. So this will come out and we will have E square by 8 pi epsilon naught H cross square J into J plus 1 minus L into L plus 1 minus 3/4 divided by 2m E squared into c squared. So we have simply put this expression of the eigenvalue here, because S dot L acting on N, L, J, Mj is going to give me this number. Then what remains is N, L, J, Mj 1 by r cube N, L, J, Mj. So we need to figure out this expectation value 1 by r cube N, L, J, Mj. In fact, you can actually calculate this. Please calculate this. Again, this I am giving you as a homework. In the assignment 3, all these problems I will supply. So if you do this, I am not doing this calculation here because it's just a mere calculation which anyone can do. So if you calculate this, this is going to give you n cube a0 cube. So your final result for E1 spin orbit NLJMJ, this is going to be E square H slash square by 8 pi epsilon naught 2me square c square, and then we have j into j plus 1 minus l into l plus 1 minus 3 by 4, and then in the denominator we have l into l plus half into l plus 1, and then 1 by n cube and then 1 by a0 cube. In fact, now if we write everything using the En0, the unperturbed energy, then this is going to give us En0 whole square divided by MEC squared n into j plus 1 minus L into L plus 1 minus 3/4 divided by L into L plus half into L plus 1. So this is the expression for the first order correction due to spin orbit coupling. Now let us look at some important salient features of this expression. Firstly, it is remarkable considering the totally different physical mechanisms involved. The relativistic correction and the spin orbit coupling are of the same order. You remember the relativistic correction also was of this order En0 square by MEC square. Here also I see that this first order correction due to spin orbit coupling is of the same order. So let us note that considering the totally different origin and physical mechanism involved. Both E1NL, in fact I now know that NLJMJ relativistic is same as E1NL MS relativistic. Both of them are same, so I can write this. Both this and E1 NLJMJ spin orbit are of the same order, which is as expected En0 whole square by me c squared. So this is our first observation. The second observation is that L equal to 0 case in this particular problem is problematic, because you see L equal to 0 is basically going to give problem to you simply because we have one L in the denominator. On the other hand, the numerator is also 0, so L equal to 0 is problematic simply because denominator is 0, but also because L equal to 0 means J equal to S, because J is L plus S. So J equal to S because L is 0. So J equal to S will immediately tell you that, look at this expression, S is half, therefore this is also going to tell you that this is 3/4. So numerator is also 0. So numerator is also 0 because for L equal to 0, J is equal to S. So this expression of energy which we have written here is indeterminate because it is 0 by 0 form. Now one way to resolve this ambiguity is to introduce something which is known as the Darwin term. Again, will be discussed in your atomic and molecular physics course, but let us not bother about this at the moment. Let us see what this form of this Darwin term is. So let us start with this expression E1 spin orbit N L J M J En0 whole square divided by me c squared n into j plus 1 minus l into l plus 1 minus 3/4 divided by l into l plus half into l plus 1. Let us say for the time being l is not equal to 0. Now since we have just said that L equal to 0 is a problem, can we think of this as, because orbital angular momentum is equal to 0 for small l equal to 0, because it vanishes, it is physically reasonable to assume that spin orbit correction vanishes for L equal to 0. However, on the other hand, the limit of the formula which I have written here as L tends to 0, while although somewhat ambiguous, still is non-zero. So that is something which you can see from this small calculation, that we set J equal to L plus half. L minus half is not going to help simply because it does not apply for L equal to 0. So set J equal to L plus half and take L going to 0 limit. What will happen then? So E1 spin orbit NLJMJ, let us write this as J equal to L plus half this is equal to En0 whole square by Me into C squared n into L plus half into L plus 3 by 2, simply because we have j into j plus 1 and j is L plus half. So the first term is L plus half into L plus 3 by 2 minus L into L plus 1 minus 3/4, and in the denominator we will have as usual L into L plus half into L plus 1. So how does it go? It goes like En0 whole square divided by MEC squared, and then L square plus 2L plus 3 by 4 minus L square minus L minus 3 by 4. So many terms will get cancelled. Of course there is an n here, n we cannot forget. So many terms are getting cancelled. L into L plus half into L plus 1. So this is equal to En0 square by MEC squared. What remains is just L into n, and then divided by L into L plus half into L plus 1. Therefore this is nothing but En0 whole square divided by MEC square L into L plus half into L plus 1. Now of course this L will no longer be there, into n. So L gets cancelled. So now if you take the limit ENLJMJ spin orbit j equal to L plus half, and you take a limit L tending to 0, this will become En0 whole square divided by MEC squared, and then you see that this L vanishes here, L vanishes from this second term also, so what remains is half in the denominator, so that gives you 2 times n. So 2 times n here. So if you now want to write in terms of alpha, this is alpha to the 4, because remember En0 in terms of the fine structure constant alpha, it was minus half alpha square MEC square into 1 by n square. So this is alpha to the 4 Me into C square into 1 by 2 n cube. So this limit, actually if you arrive at the Darwin term from the physical argument that why this term should be there even if L is equal to 0, by taking limit of this expression, we also have arrived at the same term which you would have obtained if you come step by step by following the arguments that why there is a necessity of the Darwin term. So anyway, that we are not going to discuss here, but this is what I wanted to tell you. The final thing, the next point, next important salient feature of this expression is that for L not equal to 0 states, actually in principle we can add the relativistic correction and the spin orbit coupling correction because they are of the same order, and also we can write both of these relativistic correction as well as the spin orbit coupling correction in the same coupled basis. So the result therefore will give the shifts of coupled states. That means what I am saying is the following. Let us take NLJMJ basis and let us write this H1R plus H1SO spin orbit NLJMJ. So if you do that, so this is nothing but En0 whole square divided by 2MEC square into 3 minus 4n divided by L plus half. This is the relativistic correction, and then plus En0 whole square divided by MEC squared n into j plus 1 minus L into L plus 1 minus 3 by 4 divided by L into L plus half into L plus 1. So these two terms need to be added. So let us see how we can simplify this expression. So this is En0 square by twice MEC square, say, and then we have 3 minus 4n by L plus half. Since we have taken this 2 out, we will have a 2n here. So this is just j into j plus 1 minus L into L plus 1 minus 3/4 divided by L into L plus half into L plus 1. That's it. So now we can even more simplify it. So this is En0 square by 2 MEC squared 3 plus, let us write it like 2n. You see that there is this L into L plus 1 into 4n here with a minus sign, and then we also have 2n into L plus 1 here with another minus sign. So overall it will simply be 3 into L plus 1 with a minus sign. So this is going to give us j into j plus 1 minus 3L into L plus 1 minus 3 by 4 divided by L into L plus half L plus 1. So these are the fine structure energy shifts for all states in the spectrum of the hydrogen atom. Now, even though both the relativistic and spin orbit correction terms have some trouble with L0 states, their sum is correct for all states. You see that there is no problem. So you look at this whole expression, there is no problem with the L equal to 0 state at all. So this is the total relativistic plus spin orbit correction. So this is just the fine structure energy corrections, first order energy corrections. Now in this expression, let me denote this by equation 1. In this equation 1, the states in a coupled multiplet are characterized by L, J, Mj, and each multiplet as a whole is shifted according to this equation this equation only. The degeneracy within the multiplet remains unbroken as usual because there is no explicit dependence on Mj. In this equation 1, if you look at, there is no explicit dependence on Mj, therefore the degeneracy within the multiplet, it will not change. However, this formula hides some additional degeneracies. Let us look at those degeneracies. So in this particular formula, there are two cases to consider. For fixed values of j, there are two cases to consider. The multiplets can either have L, which is j minus half, or L can be j plus half also, because these are the two things that you can get only, because j is L plus half and j is L minus half. Now the surprising result is, in both these cases, the shift is the same. That means for both these cases, if you calculate, you will get the same energy shift. That is very surprising. This means that the shift, in fact, is L independent. It is just dependent on J. So that is what we are going to discuss now. So first, let me denote this F j comma L as j into j plus 1 minus 3L into L plus 1 minus 3 by 4 divided by L into L plus half into L plus 1. Once we have defined this, our life will be simpler, because now what we are going to do is that we are going to evaluate FJL for L equal to J minus half. So this means I will simply put L equal to J minus half in this expression, and what I will get is J into J plus 1 minus 3 into J minus half into J plus half minus 3 by 4 divided by J minus half J plus half. So if you just simply expand this, this is going to give us J square plus J minus 3J plus 3 by 2. Sorry, this should be 3 by 2J plus 3 by 2J plus 3 by 4 minus 3 by 4. So all these gets cancelled, and then we have J into J plus half into J minus half. There is a 3J square which is missing, 3J square. So we have minus 3J square plus J square plus J. So this is minus 2J square plus J divided by J into J plus half into J minus half. So I can always write it as minus 2J into J minus half. Okay, and then J into J minus half into J plus half. So of course J minus half, J and J gets cancelled, and this will be given by minus 2 by J plus half. In fact, if you look at the same F but now with L equal to J plus half, you will arrive at an equation which will also be the same. Please do this calculation, it will also give you the same result. Therefore, it is very easy to write equation 1 as E1 NLJ MJ is equal to En0 whole square divided by 2MEC squared 3 plus 2N minus 2 by J plus half. And this is equal to En0 whole square divided by 2MEC squared. Let me write it as with a minus sign out, 4N divided by J plus half minus 3. And if I want to write it using alpha, then this is minus alpha to the power 4 ME C square divided by 2N to the power 4 and then N by J plus half minus 3 by 4. So we have obtained this, and let me call this quantity as minus alpha 4 ME C squared, and let me call this quantity as some capital P N comma J, with P N comma J is given by 1 by 2 N to the power 4 N by J plus half minus 3 by 4. Now, to understand the dependence on J and absence of dependence on L in the energy shifts, the total energy shifts, it requires Dirac equation. However, we cannot go into that here at this moment. But what we can do is that we can comment something more. For example, while a large number of degeneracies of H naught has been broken for fixed value of N, multiplets with the same value of J regardless of L remains degenerate. That's what is one of the important features here. and the states in each j multiplet, they do not split therefore. Also, since we have introduced this new notation P and J, you note that this P and J is always positive. Therefore, all energy shifts. So remember, this was the total energy shift N, L, J, M, J. This is the total energy shift. If this is positive, I know that this is positive, but there is an overall, this also is positive. There is an overall negative sign. So all energy shifts are basically downwards. Why this is always positive? It is very easy to check. You start with this expression n by j plus half. The question is, what is the minimum value of this? So to figure that minimum value out, you put j max here. So the minimum value will be obtained if you put the maximum value of j, the denominator will be maximum. So this should be either greater than or equal to n by j max plus half. But what is j max? J max is L max plus half. So this is n by L max plus half plus half. But what is L max plus 1? You remember that L can take values from 0 to n minus 1. So L max plus 1 is nothing but n. So this is n by n. So this is 1. So the minimum value of n by j plus half, this object, is 1. So therefore, this, what does this imply? We have 1 3 by 4 here. So n by j plus half minus 3/4 should always be greater than 1/4. Always. So this immediately implies that this object P and J is always positive. Now for a fixed n, states with lower values of j get pushed even further down. That you can see from this expression itself. And as n increases, splitting falls off like 1 by n cube and so and so. And in fact, you can prepare a table for this P and J values. For example, you can choose the value of n, choose the value of j, and see what this P and J are. For example, if you choose n equal to 1, if you choose j equal to half, then you can use this expression of P and J. You will get this as 1 by 8. Similarly, if you can choose n equal to 2, then there are two values of j. One is half, another is 3 by 2. Because n is equal to 2 means L is equal to 0 and 1. L equal to 0 and 1 means j is equal to L plus half and L minus half. So you can figure that out from this, that j should be either half or 3 by 2. Now if j is equal to half, what is P and J? J is equal to half here, and n we have said equal to 2. So 2 to the power 4 is already there. J is equal to half means it is half plus half is equal to 1. So this is 2 minus 3 by 4th, and then this is 1 by 128. So this is 5 by 128. So this is 5 by 128. Similarly, if you calculate for 3 by 2, it will turn out to be easily 1 by 128. So these are those things which ultimately will help you later. That's why I am making this table. And similarly, you can calculate for n is equal to 3, n is equal to 4, what these values of P and J's are. Now comes the final thing, that means the table that we were actually always drawing. So let me again go back and copy paste this table which we have drawn here. So if we have nothing, no perturbation, then these were the states. Now I have this fine structure, and we have already seen that whatever our corrections are all going downwards. Therefore, let me take a different color here. So the ground state correction, it will be something going down here. Similarly, all these states here, it will be like this, and here it will be like this. Okay, I think it's better to draw another plot. So I had this, L is equal to 0, L is equal to 1, L is equal to 2, like this. That means this is S, this is P, this is D, and this is F. L is equal to 3. And also my N is equal to 1, N is equal to 2. Let us restrict ourselves to only 3 values. It will be sufficient to understand from 3. And let me draw the unperturbed levels. Suppose this is this, this is this, and this is this. N is equal to 1, N is equal to 2, N is equal to 3. Now I have seen that the energy levels are going down. So it is going down. Here it has gone down. Here it has gone down. Let me draw them first, then I will explain. Here also it has gone down, gone down, gone down, gone down. Now, oops, like this. So what is happening here? Let me explain. So first of all, this 1s half state has gone down. 2s half state also has gone down. This is my 2p half, and this is my 2p 3 by 2. But you note that these two remains degenerate. These two states remains degenerate because they have same n and same j. Both are having j equal to half. Both are having n is equal to 2. Similarly, you come here and you see that this and this, that means what is this? This was 3p half, and this was 3p 3 by 2. The lower one is 3d 3 by 2. The upper one is 3d 5 by 2. So here also this 3p 3 by 2 and 3d 3 by 2, they are also degenerate simply because they have the same n 3 and same j 3 by 2. Now 2p 3 by 2, here let us look at this thing. 2p 3 by 2 has a higher j which is equal to 3 by 2. Therefore, that p and j which we have defined, it is smaller. You look at this p and j here. P and j for 2p 3 by 2, it is smaller, and therefore it lowers less. Therefore, it is comparatively on a higher side than 2p half. So this therefore completes the discussion on fine structure of hydrogen atom. Of course, again, the degeneracies are partially removed, as we have seen. Not all the degeneracies are removed because, as we have seen, that these MS and ML, MM degeneracies cannot be removed because they are not explicitly entering into the expression for the energy correction. So this is roughly what fine structure of hydrogen atom will give you. And this picture that I have just drawn here, you can see in many books. Go back and see different books, they are plotted differently. I just wanted you to understand what does the degeneracy mean here and what are the spectroscopic notations here, because these things will be helpful in your other course. So let me stop here. From next day onwards we will start a new topic.